Unless we say something like, oh, look at that, just ignore it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the four of us having a great conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it might be that something is there and we're talking and maybe, you know, body in white comes up or something, and then there's maybe a picture of body in white there, and then maybe you could explain, you know, if that comes up. But I mean, you know, we would say, oh, like that.
Yes.
But otherwise, if they're just showing stuff and we're just talking, I mean, it would be like, we're just talking.
Good. That's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, it's all it is.
So, Drew, you've been driving a lot of cars to evaluate for the interiors, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What'd you like the best?
Well, you know, we drove everything from a $280,000 Bentley Continental GT to the least expensive was a Nissan Kicks. And they were all
around 18 base.
Yeah, our tester was 23, which was well equipped. And the thing that amazed us is really the low-priced vehicles like the Nissan Kicks and some others, really well done interiors now. I mean, stitched interiors, high quality materials, good design, colors. I mean, really a lot of effort went in. So that was really impressive. And then of course, you know, the Bentley was just the amount of handwork and stuff that goes in there.
Yeah.
And the beautiful fits and everything that was really nice. But in between, a lot of Lincoln is doing a tremendous job on interiors now, which, you know, we didn't think not that long ago wasn't doing.
They were okay.
Yeah.
No, they've stepped it up. David Woodhouse has made a big difference there.
And sort of the user experience in there and everything, all the interfaces and everything, very well done. But a lot of BMW 850, another one, just wonderful. You know, you get in and it is, the interior is becoming like the center of the universe now for the auto industry for so much, you know, because everything used to be about horsepower and exterior styling, and now it's so much more. People are interested in what's going on inside. How well does it hook?
Don't you think, too, the public's more aware of what makes for a good interior? You know, they've had, because of us in the media drilling it into their head, hard plastic, bad. You know, we want the nice stitching. In fact, we want the off-color thread in the stitching and blah, 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 you know, the soft touch materials. I think the public knows how to expect more now.
Well, because I think between the way they marketed consumer electronics for the interfaces and then the way furniture and, you know, fashion and everything, that's all become, you know, people spend money for their glasses or for their clothes, and so that continues. Now they get in a car, they expect to have, you know, they sit down, the armrests, they expect them to be, you know, soft. It's nice when they're heated, you know, when it's cold out. There's just all sorts of things that I think people expect.
Well, you spend more time sitting in your car and seeing the interior than you do looking at it from the outside. So there's some logic there.
Yeah, but that's always been the case. You know,
yeah, no, I agree.
But I think the public is more aware now of what makes for a really nice interior. And automakers know they got to spend more money to do it.
Yes.
Okay, maybe there could be an argument that since the original Taurus completely changed automotive design and made cars have a profound similarity in terms of what the sheet metal looks like, and this we've been living with this ever since. I mean, although we could discern differences between one and the other, that the only place that car makers can truly make a statement in terms of their difference from the other guys is inside the car.
Well, I think you could certainly make that argument because there's the whole shift towards SUVs and CUVs, the same.
That all
you know,
look the
that,
same.
That two-box silhouette, that it's just, they do their best, but they aren't that different. But inside you can do quite a bit more because people are right, you know, they're like immersed in it. Just things like the headliner, nobody used to pay attention to what the headliner was, just the, you know.
Rat fur.
Rat fur. Now we looked even on like the Hyundai Santa Fe, which is a mid-priced car. You look up at the headliner there, and it's all this, you know, knit, and we were saying it looks like a tweed jacket or something. But the attention, you know, the high quality sort of textures and look of it was just, I think, in a vehicle at that price range was really, well, really cool that they're paying that much attention. But I think it shows most people, you would ask them, they've had a car for 10 years, and you'd say, what color is the headliner, or what's it made of? I bet you they probably couldn't tell you.
If you think about it, nobody ever paid attention to headliners except for when they would start sagging.
Right.
You know what I mean? It would just be. Those were the days, huh?
Yeah.
The sagging headliner.
And then, now you go up to the ultra luxury where you have Alcantara and all this other stuff.
Okay, we're going to get going here officially now. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
All right, Autoline After Hours again, Gary. We get to do it.
We do. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. How about you?
I was doing really well till I was driving over here.
Oh, no.
And I always used to like the design of the Ford Flex in a quirky sort of way,
Yeah.
very rectangular.
Right.
And I saw one today that was pink.
Yuck.
And that just
That
sort of like,
that
it
doesn't
just
work.
changed the day. I mean, just,
Hey, we got to let everybody know Drew Winter from Wards is with us. Great to have you on the
That's
show.
great to be here, John.
And our special guest today is Jody Hall. She's the Vice President for Automotive at the Steel Market Development Institute. Whew, I got all that out
Yes.
there. Right. Jody, great having
Good.
you on the show.
Great, thank you. It's great to be here, John.
Yeah, so SMDI is what, kind of like almost an R&D operation?
Yeah, it's a trade organization. We're part of the American Iron and Steel Institute. So the business unit, the SMDI, Steel Market Development Institute, does work with the auto industry in integrating our new products into the industry. So we do R&D projects directly with automakers and really try to do our best to get them into the vehicles.
And you spent a chunk of your career at General Motors, right?
I did. My first 30 years. I'm a metallurgist. My first 30, yeah.
She's going to be around a long time.
So yeah, 30 years
Body
metallurgist.
engineering or metal?
yes.
Strictly metallurgy?
So I'm a metallurgist by education, and
she's got a PhD. Let's
Yeah,
not.
okay.
I mean, this is the smartest person we're ever going to know that knows about materials.
Very nerdy about metals. So yes, my first 15 years all in manufacturing engineering, all advanced technology. Powertrain first half, body second half. So it was very interesting to see all that different technology.
Cool. Good stuff.
So when you were at General Motors, did you see a shift in material use in terms of closures or chassis, or, I mean,
Yes, because
what
I
did
was
you witness?
implementing that.
Okay.
So, and the shift was always, there was always a lot of focus on lightweighting. So we were working with the steel industry at the time, and they were coming out with high-strength steels, advanced high-strength steels, and so on. So we worked on the higher-strength steels. So the higher the strength, the less of it you need, and that's how you get the lightweighting. We are also working with the aluminum industry and implementing some of their products as well. But you have this need for mass reduction, and you also have the need to keep costs down. So it depended on the application of what you would actually end up using. But a lot of times, steel, and it's true today as well, is more cost effective. So, we reverted back to steel when it was really important for the cost and mass versus just mass alone.
And what did you write your thesis on when you were getting your PhD?
You have a good memory, Gary. I studied the fatigue effect of silicon carbide reinforced aluminum.
So basically, I bring that up because you have profound knowledge of the other material.
Yes, yeah.
So that's-
Having worked in both, yes. It's
So that brings up my question. I think you go back to like the 1950s when people were predicting that steel would eventually be phased out, a few years in the future for lighter weight materials. And that really didn't happen. And then I just remember covering the introduction of the Ford F-150, the latest generation, which was all aluminum. And then the thinking was, I think, at least you would hear from all the pundits and analysts, they were saying, well, obviously, every pickup truck maker, every new pickup is going to be all aluminum, just like the Ford F-150. And that hasn't happened now. We've seen a generation come and go. And so why didn't that happen? I guess, is it the same reason steel has been around for so long? Or
It actually is a lot of the same reasons, and something that I had worked on years ago when I was at General Motors, and then I started at SMDI in the fall of 2014, and we know what was launched in the fall of 2014.
F-150.
So I immediately jumped right into this big challenge. So yeah, the materials battle has gone on forever since the automobile started. And steel is always being challenged by other materials. And like you pointed out in the 50s, everybody thought by the 60s there won't be any more steel. And then even, with the F-150 rolling out and, predictions, Ducker forecasted 7 out of 10 pickups. And that was in 2014. And 5 years later, it hasn't happened yet. There hasn't been another major announcement. In fact, several pickup trucks, had the Ram and the Silverado and all kinds other pickups have come out, and they're still steel intensive. They have a few more aluminum closures, but steel intensive. And I think that Ducker at the time, they were talking to all the automakers and getting the information, and the automakers were saying, yeah, we're looking at aluminum. But then,
that ugly cost issue raised its ugly head, right?
the ugly cost issue and
tooling, manufacturing, all that has to be changed.
there's so much to it, and we have a reputation in the industry of collaborating directly with our customer, and collaborating as an industry is really helpful to automakers. It's an efficient way for them to do it instead of working with our member companies and other steel companies individually trying to solve the same problem. We work together as an industry and we leverage all those resources, and we can do it more cost effectively and quicker and bring them those results. So that certainly has been on our side. And my favorite thing to say is that we innovate by collaboration. So because we do it together, we deliver products that our customers need. So customers being the OEMs designing these great vehicles. So we design to their needs and we work together with them to implement it. And that's really one of the keys to our success. Plus the physics behind steel that really make it cost effective. When you make steel, it's 7 times less energy just to make steel versus aluminum. Because of the separation from the ore and the oxides to make the metal, we're more efficient. So we have that cost advantage. And then, we have some strength and other advantages as well.
So this collaboration, so if John had a steel company and Drew had a steel company and I had a steel company and we're working through you, okay, and you are the conduit to the OEM, is his steel and Drew's steel and my steel all going to be the same steel?
No. There's going to be similar things. We have specifications that we work to, standards, classifications. So we'll say, we need a steel that has a certain strength, that performs a certain way. And you would all go back and design your steel and design by what alloying elements and how you would process the steel so it behaves the same. So in the end, it more or less behaves the same, but it's all done differently. And a lot of that is because our steel makers have different equipment. Because the steel has been around for a long time. It's, very capital intensive, just like the automotive industry, capital intensive. And, they have their infrastructures and they're going to specialize in certain areas. So not all of our members make all of the same steels. There's a lot of overlap, but there are differences as well.
Hey, we're getting a number of questions in from the audience right now. If you'd like to get in on this, shoot us an email, send it to viewermail@autoline.tv. If you're watching on YouTube, you can be in the chat room. We're monitoring the chat room for questions, and we'll take a phone call too. And that number is 620-288-6546. We'll run through a couple of these real quick. Jose Ortiz wants to know, will there ever be carbon fiber beds for trucks? I guess the answer is easy.
Yeah.
GMC on the Sierra Denali is already offering that. So
Yeah.
yes, there is. I can't, it's a handle here. It looks like CRFZG1000 says, what did GM ever learn from Saturn and using plastics? And he wants to know, why aren't hoods and trunk lids made out of plastic?
Those are good questions. Some of the things that GM learned is that you don't get a nice paint surface finish
With plastic.
with plastic. There are some issues. Obviously, the Corvette, beautiful, but it's not lending itself towards high volume. I remember working with some issues with some paint pops and things like that. So, and it's a lower volume process to make those panels. It's a longer, it will take a few minutes to make a panel versus when you're stamping metal, you can stamp it in seconds. So the throughput is really different as well. So it's ideally suited for low volume vehicles like the Corvette, but not so much the large volume.
I remember covering the Saturn a lot, and one of the other things they learned was that particularly the thermoplastic that they used for the body panels on the Saturns expanded and contracted a lot, so then they had to have these really big gaps between the panels. And that was during a time when everybody was trying to get thin down the gaps for a higher quality look. So
Yeah, and the thickness of the material that you use for those panels affects those gaps as well. So
I owned a
and
Saturn. No one cared about those gaps. we all.
Yeah.
It's like owning a Harley. You're a part of a club. So.
Right.
So I never bought that. I never bought that
Yeah.
gap stuff.
Times are different though, because I remember during my career, it was okay, and then by the time I started working in sheet metal and in the 90s, it was all of a sudden it was really important, those gaps.
Still is, I would argue.
It is now, but that's like started a big
that
trend.
launched
That was,
the
be-
whole-
that was
Yeah.
because when you had Toyota and Honda were coming in and they were having these really nice door gaps, and then suddenly, the Detroit Three are going, maybe we should do that too.
Yeah, perceived quality. I remember
Right.
Bob Lutz was
Yeah.
one at GM that was really big on perceived quality, and had to change our mindsets because of that. So.
Okay, we got another question here. Barry Rectory from Indy says, is there a metal that auto manufacturers are not using that you think would be good for vehicles?
That's a really good question. I'm a little biased.
We noticed.
Begins with an S and ends with an L.
I guess I could say third generation advanced high strength steels.
Talk a little bit about that, because how many grades of steel are there? Does anybody even know?
Well, I've lost count because I've been rolling out information to the media, sharing everything that we're doing that's new and
So
interesting.
what, 120, 130 different grades of
Yeah,
more?
over 200.
Over 200.
Yeah, over 200 automotive sheet grades.
Okay, just
Yeah.
automotive sheet.
Just automotive sheet.
So talk about what's the latest, coolest, greatest steel that you're most excited about,
Our third generation.
which is what?
So our third generation is, so advanced high strength steels are those really super strong steels that bring you the strength and rigidity to help protect the passenger. So when you get it in a crash, you have less intrusion and also contributes to lightweighting. So, but third generation steels have also some more formability. So the really high strength steels are difficult to form. Sometimes we have to heat them up, like our hot stamping process, to get the geometries to form the right part. So when you combine the formability with the geometry, you can get even more mass reduction, even more performance out of the component. So our third generation is that great advanced high strength category with more formability.
Do you have to hot stamp it?
You don't have to hot stamp it.
Wow, so big cost savings from a manufacturing standpoint. Easier.
is.
Tooling costs would be lower, right?
Tooling cost is lower, and again, that speed of manufacturing is
Tooling people are not going to want to see this. They love those hot stamp dies. They were so complicated to make. You had
Yeah.
to heat them and quench them and all this other stuff.
Yeah, there will always, I think, be a place for hot stamping still because you can get even more complex geometry, and that technology is not standing still either. They're getting even higher strengths out of that. They're up to 2,000 megapascals, which is 10 times the strength of steel used in the 70s. The steel we used for everything in the 70s was about 200. So it's amazing where the technology has gone.
So for those who are not really into steel, can't imagine that they wouldn't
can't
be.
imagine.
But okay, so basically, there's steel that make up a vehicle that people don't see, right? The body in white, as it were, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's the steel that people do see, the closure panels, the doors and the hood and so on. Are these the same materials, just thicker in one place and thinner in another, or are they two different types of material?
So in the 70s, that was true. It was just a difference of thickness. Now it's all different grades because, and the reason why we have over 200 grades, and not that every automaker uses 200 grades, but there are hundreds of parts that make up a vehicle. And the exterior ones have to be nice styling, they have to have good paintability, and they're not really structural. But the stuff underneath, the body in white, that is...
Here we got a picture of a body in white up on the
that's
screen
perfect,
right now.
yes. So yeah, you can see that that needs to be really strong and rigid around the passengers to protect them in collision. And that front end structure that's being shown right there has to be strong, but it also has to absorb a lot of energy, so it keeps that away from the passengers. And those are different grades. Some are higher strength and very rigid and no ductility, and others have some energy absorbing capability. It's all that combination of the steel grade along with the design that the automakers do with that.
When somebody designs that body in white, so they look at each of the pieces as something to channel energy in a certain direction, and the energy coming from a crash, whether it's from the side or from the front or from the rear?
Yes, that is very important. Designing the load paths through the structure, and that's why I think you see if you look at the body in whites of different OEMs, they have different technologies they use. Like I know a few years ago, Ford was really big on hydroformed roof rails, and that's what they use. They use dual phase 1000 in the roof rail of the Edge for anti-intrusion and things, rollover, whereas Acura was using some high-strength dual-phase stamped parts that, to get the same thing, and now they're using like press-hardened steel door rings. So they all, fortunately, they're all using steel for all that.
What is press-hardened steel?
Press-hardened steel is the same as hot stamp. So you have to heat up the blank because it's so strong. You have to heat it up and get it pliable. So it's red hot, it goes into the press, and it's moved by a robot to put it in the press. The press comes down, forms the shape like with the die. It holds it there while the die cools it. So there's water that runs through the die, extracts the heat, and then when it gets to a certain temperature, it's pulled out, and then it's a very strong, rigid material. It gets a martensitic microstructure, which is the strongest microstructure for steel.
That's what I thought.
Okay, so I've got a non-technical question.
Sure.
I visited a ArcelorMittal factory in East Chicago a couple years ago. Incredible place, everything's automated, and I was just stunned to learn that they said that they have all these jobs there that pay like $100,000 a year, and they're worried about filling them because they have a lot of their employees are 50 years or older, and they're going to have a big wave of steel workers retiring, and what they need is a new wave of young people, but they have to be, because everything's so automated, they need people with, that are statisticians or whatever, that have very technical backgrounds. And the pay is great, but they said they're having trouble recruiting young people into the steel industry because it's not sexy like Silicon Valley or whatever. So, I mean, have you made progress with that, or is that, should I be asking somebody else that question? Or?
Yeah, I'm sure our members would have more to say about that. But yeah, we are making progress because we are talking about the innovations in steel. We're trying to reach out to more like at the college level and let them know, it's a really fascinating industry. So when I get opportunities to go and talk to college students and tell them about the great careers in the industry, I love to do that because they think of steel as like, well, some people would say, well, you still make steel in the U.S.?
Yeah.
I was like,
or you still make steel, period.
yeah, what are well, it's an old technology, and actually a lot of universities don't teach as much steel as they used to because they think, oh, we know everything we need to know about that.
Yeah.
There's no improvement. It's like we have changed so much in the last couple of decades, and we're still changing. We continue to innovate. So, certainly it's still difficult. I think, to be honest with you, it's difficult even for the OEMs right now to hire because everybody wants to
It's a
go work
problem
for
I hear
Google.
everywhere I go. Everywhere I
Yeah.
go in the industry.
All the young people want to work on future mobility.
Yeah.
So,
At least we got future mobility to offer them.
yes.
Hey, we got some terrific questions coming in here from the audience. Raymond Hageman wants to know, how do the newer high-strength steels affect the stamping properties and therefore the designer's wishes on exterior vehicle styling? Do your new steels limit what they can do or enhance it, or is there no difference?
I'm going to say the answer is yes. They enhance and limit. So yeah, the higher strength steels will give you better strength and more performance. And for outer panels, you probably don't need to go to those super high strength
Because they're just
material.
ornamentation. They're just going for the ride.
Yeah. Right. And they do limit your styling because the formability isn't as good. When the higher in strength, it's just kind of the physics of the material, which we're trying to change, but that's difficult. The higher the strength, the less formability that you tend to get. But there are lots of tricks and things you could do. That's why we're working on third generation advanced high strength steel.
I hope I say this guy's name right, or gal. Pham Nguyen wants to know, and this is a great question, what elements make up high-strength steels? How do you get these different grades?
There are lots of different recipes to do that, and it all depends on the alloying elements. You don't need a lot because you need very little carbon when you're making steel. Less than 0.1%, and you get steel. You take iron, add a little bit of carbon, you get steel. So you can add, like a 0.05 niobium or titanium to enhance things, silicon, manganese. There's lots of different ways to do it. And it goes back to the equipment you have to process, and that will change the actual alloying elements that you would use. And then the thermomechanical properties change it as well. So that's how we get so many different grades.
Okay, he's got a follow-up too, and then we'll get to
Okay.
the other guys. But would stainless steel be good for cars if the price of nickel came down?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Wasn't the DeLorean stainless?
yeah.
I was thinking about that.
And exhaust pipes and all that,
Yeah.
the exhaust system's stainless, but
Yeah, and certainly if the price of the alloying elements come down, I think that we would be using more and more alloying elements because we do have the grades of steel that we looked at. Stainless steel can offer that high strength and really, really good formability. But it does tend to be expensive because of the alloying elements, and it's actually more difficult to weld. So joining is an issue. So I don't know if the cost came down enough. If we would just have to work on joining and come up with new
How much of a
solutions.
consideration is things like if a factory is full of spot welding robots and as you change materials, as you go to this new third generation steel, is it possible that someone would say, well, gee, I've got all this equipment here and this steel isn't going to weld the same, therefore I think I'll keep using the old stuff. Is that a consideration?
That is a consideration, that's for sure. Body shops are very expensive, and you want to use them for several cycles of a vehicle, not just model years, but cycles. So once you make a big commitment, you want to use it, 10, 12, 15 years. Minor changes, but to empty a body shop and rebuild it, I think it costs Ford maybe $1 billion for 2 plants for the F-150 because they did have to change everything. That all their joining techniques are quite a bit different than with steel. And the automakers are comfortable with steel. They have the infrastructure. They know how to stamp it and weld it and paint it and all that. So as we develop new grades of steel, it's more of incremental changes instead of that wholesale, empty the manufacturing floor and put in a whole new infrastructure.
But the new high-strength steels, they don't weld much differently than sort of the previous high-strength steels, or do they? Or is that?
We're finding the third generation are welding a bit different, and
Okay.
that's a challenge right now that we're working on and to get those implemented.
Along those lines, Mike Flowers wrote in to ask, can a unibody be stronger with structural adhesives, or is welding stronger?
It's an excellent question. Yeah, actually, the combination is the perfect combination. They're stronger and stiffer, so you can get additional lightweighting. And I think that just adhesives alone aren't enough. I think you need that weld or some kind of mechanical fastener or something to help support the adhesive, but the two work very well together.
So you mentioned and Drew alluded to the new pickup trucks that have come out. So you mentioned the new Ram is a steel-intensive vehicle using a variety of grades. The Silverado is a multi-material structure. They decided to use different things. Do you think going forward that more vehicles will have more materials rather than all these wonderful steels?
You know, it's very possible, but my job is to make sure that doesn't happen. You know, when I tell reporters, I say, well, you know, steel is really its own set of mixed materials because it's so different when you look at the traditional mild steel grades, the high strength, advanced high strengths, press hardened steel or hot stamp steel, martensitic roll formed. We have the stainless steels, which are used for some applications, our new third generation. There's no other material like it. Unless you go to a composite type material, there's no other material that covers that range of performance. So we like to think we're already a mixed material, but certainly, there are applications that are better suited for other materials, and we focus on vehicle structures and a lot on closures and some chassis applications because that's where we excel. So, we know there are other areas that other materials excel in. So, we agree with automakers. There is a right material for each application, and it has to be optimized.
A couple of more good questions here from the audience. Jay Siegel wants to know, what about 3D printing with steel?
3D printing with steel is definitely a possibility. It's probably for a sheet metal application, which
Not
is
so much.
mainly what we do, not as much. Probably great for like prototyping parts and things like that, but for high volume production, I think we're a long ways from that.
Gotcha. And Chuck Grenchi wants to know, have there been advancements in steel that has memory? So if it's dented, it can revert to its original shape.
I know there's been a lot of work in that area, and I have to confess that I know nothing about memory steels.
Okay. Let's see. Ray Mitrowitz wants to know, what's your take on aluminum and how it's affecting the steel industry in automotive?
The aluminum industry has added challenges for steel that I think have been very good for us because we've always, like I said, we've innovated, we've collaborated, and when aluminum comes along and surprises us in the F-150, it challenges the industry, and I think a lot of good has come out of the steel industry because of that challenge. And I'm sure the aluminum industry looks at steel and says, look what they're doing. Let's see how we can. So that competition really brings out innovation.
So one of the big arguments I think we've heard for a long time is which is more environmentally friendly. And, there's steel's recyclable, aluminum's recyclable. Steel says they're more energy efficient and less CO2. Then the aluminum industry says, hey, we've got foundries in Iceland that use hydropower, no CO2, and back and forth. So, I mean, I guess what feedback do you get from the industry about, is there, a sense of how much the auto industry listens to these arguments?
There's a small part of the auto industry that's listening to those arguments, and it's growing. It's becoming more and more important. But, back even my days at General Motors, I remember there were so many different criteria that you had to meet when you're developing the vehicle, all the different parts and the structures together. It has to be mass efficient and certainly meet the performance, all the performance requirements, strength and fatigue and durability and all that. And, it has to be cost effective, it has to be this, it has to be that, you have to manufacture it. And then now, on top of all that, you have to add, sustainability. So I think when the steel industry started talking about sustainability, we're talking to engineers, and the engineers are like, time out, we're overloaded. We can't think about one more thing right now. We've got enough challenges. So we were talking to the wrong people, and when we figured out that, you know, the engineers have all that on their plate, we really need to be talking about the people that are planning the platforms and deciding, you know, how to get their fuel economy efficiencies out of the vehicle. Are they going to put money into lightweighting? Are they going to put money into powertrain systems and things like that? And that has been more effective. And we've been really careful in the steel industry to get to follow ISO standards and get peer reviews of all the work that we've done, make sure it's well documented with the latest input data and things like that, instead of using anything outdated. And you know, the aluminum industry is fortunate that they're a little bit newer industry, and that they have put some of their manufacturing or their foundry areas in places where they can use hydroelectricity. So, but that's hydroelectricity that's not going somewhere else. So you could say, you know, really everything gets spread across all the different energy sources. They just happen to be able to use the hydropower, where we're still using more traditional energy sources. But still, in the end, when all that washes out, steel emits about 4.5 times less CO2 emissions when we make steel. So it gives us a big advantage, because if you look at the life cycle of a vehicle, it takes until the very end of life for aluminum and steel to be equal. We have fewer emissions in production phase, they have fewer emissions during the use phase, and in the end, it's a close race.
But then you get into recycling, and you guys have an advantage there.
We do. You know, being magnetic makes a huge, huge advantage for sorting. And we also have the advantage of when you melt steel together, you don't have to sort by different grades. You can melt all our different grades together and produce any of those grades. Whereas aluminum, to really get the most out of your recycling, you have to sort the grades because of the alloying sensitivity.
You lose the properties that automakers would like in particular.
Yeah, you have to downgrade it to castings or something as opposed to extrusions or sheet metal.
You alluded to future mobility. Mm-hmm. Does steel have a future in future mobility?
Steel has a great future in future mobility.
Why?
Well, because, you know, the work that we do mainly in sheet is all about the structure of the vehicle and the chassis. And there are aspects of that that aren't going to change a whole lot. Sure, it's going to look different, and there are definitely challenges, but we're well positioned for those challenges, because a couple of key areas are packaging batteries. Because of the strength of steel, when you do any kind of packaging, we have smaller, more efficient sections because of the high strength. When you use a lower strength material, you have to have a larger geometry to perform the same and thicker material. So we can package more batteries, and we can get a little more efficiency out of that. And then also, when you look at autonomous vehicles, they have this beautiful interior. It's very inviting, easy ingress and egress, because they removed that center pillar. That center pillar is a very important part of a structure. And, you know, for noise and vibration, and also for collision performance. But in an autonomous vehicle, people are going to expect that to be out of the way so they can get in and out of the vehicle and into their nice family room type setting like we're sitting here today. So I think because of steel strength and efficiency and how you can design the load paths and things, I think we're going to see that steel's going to have a part in the industry.
So you'd have a hot stamped giant door ring for the...
Just going to be a larger, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that we need to keep the occupants safe in the future. It's going to be a long time before we get rid of all collisions. So I think that we have a strong future.
We're probably down to the end here, but good question from Norm from Toronto. What about the tariffs? You know, does the SMDI take a position on that at all? Because I got to tell you, we get a lot of different companies to come into our studio here. Mm-hmm. The ones that have to buy steel, they are up in arms.
Yes. As the SMDI does not actually get involved in tariffs. I think that's why we're separated from the American Iron and Steel Institute. That is their primary job.
You
is
just stick to
handle
the technical side.
I stick to the technical. I'm very happy doing that.
Okay, then one last question. Our work wants to know. He says, back when cars were dissolving, AMC was doing a good job at corrosion resistance. He wants to know, what are the treatments, guarantees, and performance these days? Isn't there a rule that you can have no rust through for 10 years?
It's now up to 15.
15 years.
Yes. And so you would think that would be even challenging because as we lightweight, we get thinner and thinner. So there's less steel there. So I think it's a bigger challenge in the chassis area that automakers are not as comfortable getting below a certain thickness because they're worried about that. But we're doing work in that area on coating technologies and things to show that you'll be fine. We're working on the corrosion issues. We have different zinc coatings and adding alloying to that to make sure that we can do 15 plus years.
Good deal. Jody Hall, thanks so much for coming on. Who knew there was so much to talk about with
Who knew?
steel?
Yes, thanks for having me here. It was a pleasure.
Good deal. Okay, we're going to take a quick break right now. We got plenty to talk about what's going on in the rest of the industry. But first, a shout out to the sponsors that make this show possible.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what BorgWarner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back. No Dr. Data today.
No, but I got a little quiz that has nothing to do with numbers, so there's no data.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to say two names, and you guys tell me who these people are. Now, that you're gonna jump on each other's when I say this. So whoever gets the first one has to answer the second one. Steve Harris.
GM PR guy.
GM PR guy, Chrysler PR guy,
that's right,
American
yeah.
Motors PR guy, one of the greatest public relations executives in the history of the auto industry.
Okay. Ray Day.
Ford.
Ford Public Relations, now the head of all corporate communications for IBM.
Okay. Dave Arnold.
Ooh, that name sounds familiar, but I can't say I know who it is.
Yeah.
Which I find to be very interesting that you guys immediately knew who those other guys were.
Yeah.
And I must admit that when I saw Dave Arnold's name, I didn't know who he was either. It turns out that Dave Arnold was Tesla's senior director of communications,
Oh, yeah.
who is leaving the company after 2.5 years.
Oh.
And I mean, it just struck me so odd that, you know.
Don't even know who he is.
Yeah, and you guys, I mean, and it's just like, and this is basically all we do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and not to know that there was such a person.
Yeah, and he's almost at 2.5 years. That's almost like a lifer status at Tesla.
Yeah, but you know, how many PR directors has Tesla had?
That's what I mean, yeah.
Well,
You know, and remember
okay, but-
Simon Spruill, who's been on this show,
Right.
he had a cup of coffee there until he bolted.
Yeah. Well, but Dave Arnold had replaced Sarah O'Brien, and she was there for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another one. See.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's about all that they can take is about
But,
2 years, and then they're out of there.
Yeah, but the company's not been around for a very long time. So.
Well, it's been around for like 15 years or something.
Yeah,
but they have a different relationship with the automotive media than certainly traditional automakers do.
Okay, I got a quiz for you guys then.
All right.
What is the best-selling hybrid passenger car in the United States?
Just regular hybrid.
Passenger car, so not CUV or whatever.
So the immediate thought is Prius, so it's obviously not the Prius.
That's right.
It's got to be the Prius.
It's not. Ford Fusion now outsells the Prius 2-to-1.
Oh my God.
2-to-1.
That is just stunning
Now,
to me.
Then a call out.
I think two things have happened. Number one is the RAV4 hybrid came out,
Oh,
and that really hurt Prius sales. And the other thing is the styling of the Prius, which to me just doesn't do
It's
it.
gone. The last couple of generations have not been good. But I mean, that's just stunning because they used to sell something like 300,000
Yeah.
a year or something. They had huge numbers.
Do you got the numbers?
Well,
there?
for the first quarter, they were down 45.8% Prius sales. So, and unfortunately, Ford doesn't call out.
No, they don't. But Ward's does, and I'm using Ward's data
Yeah.
there for you, Drew. But no, I was
I
stunned
should
when
know
I
that.
saw that.
The
So
story there, yeah.
Gary and I were at this big Ford hybrid thing tomorrow. We can't talk about it now because tomorrow is the day that the embargo comes
lift,
off.
yeah.
Attention, Ford, if John says anything, it was John. Not,
Yeah.
Right. No, and they've got a good hybrid story. In fact, that was the other thing. Ford sells 80% more hybrids than Honda. And Honda's got, I think, 9 models. Ford's only got 2, the Fusion and the MKZ, which is just the Lincoln version of the Fusion. But I was stunned to see how successful Ford is with its hybrid right now.
Yeah.
Right, but okay, so to stick up for Honda here for a moment, okay?
Somebody's gotta do it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, so if we were to look at, I don't know, Accord sales and compare them to, Fusion sales, I mean, it's like a rounding error.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
so, I mean, let's face it, quickly name a Honda hybrid vehicle.
Honda Accord hybrid.
But
Fabulous car. I mean,
but it doesn't really seem to exist.
yeah, and that made our 10 best engines list, I think, this last year. I mean, or this year. I mean, it's a fantastic hybrid.
Right.
I mean, it feels like almost feels like a Tesla. I mean, it's a fantastic engine.
And I think that's the 3rd generation hybrid that
Yeah.
they had, because then remember they had the high performance hybrid for the Accord. It was like 280 horsepower, I think.
Yeah, they've had a couple of performance-oriented hybrids, and those didn't go over too well. But I mean, the Accord's fabulous. Well, and then the Honda Insight, which they don't promote much as a hybrid. But it's that's a really nice package as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole car.
But going back to your point, you're alluding to the fact that the RAV4 hybrid is selling like mad. Why is that? It's a crossover.
Crossover,
And
exactly.
why,
Well,
why
the
is,
RAV4.
why is the Insight not doing well? Or you know what I mean? It's just like nobody's buying these things anyway.
Yeah. Well, and the RAV4 is just, I mean, that's it's one of the top selling vehicles in the U.S. I mean, it's like got to be in like the top 5 or something. I mean, it's
Hey, at the end of last week's show, we were talking about adaptive cruise control, and somebody asked, can you have it with manual transmissions? And we were like, no, you can't. And then somebody wrote in and said, wait a minute, Toyota's got it on the Corolla. So JP Flaherty wrote in and said, the new Toyota Corolla, it has what they call the intelligent manual transmission. You can have adaptive cruise control. Now, what he said is when you get down below 20 miles an hour, the thing will switch off. So it doesn't have full stop and resume again. But he said once you set the speed, if you're going up a grade and you want to downshift, it will not turn off the cruise control. It'll go right back to the speed that you had set for it. I was not aware of that. So kudos to the after hours audience.
Yeah, really.
He also said he's got a friend that's got a VW Golf R with a manual, and he says it does the same thing too. I was not aware of that.
I wasn't, but that would make sense, particularly in Germany, because a lot more people still do drive manuals, and then on the Autobahn or whatever, that would make perfect sense. You're in high gear, and it would just, you wouldn't get out of it.
G. Mason wrote in to say, if the Fusion's selling so well, why is Ford getting away doing away with it. They're not. They're keeping the Fusion. Yeah, the Focus, the Fiesta, the C-Max, the whatevers are going away, but they're keeping the Fusion. What else do you got, Gary?
Well, I thought it was sort of interesting this week that we talked about this a little bit last week. Nissan's earnings were reported this week. So just think about this. So the guy who's running the joint now, Sakawa, who took over for Carlos Ghosn, said, quote, "Today we have hit rock bottom." Can you imagine the CEO of, car company or anything else saying we have hit rock bottom? And oh, by the way, is saying that next year isn't going to be so great either?
Wow.
No, in fact, they missed the analysts' expectations or
Yeah.
guidance by a mile. And then to your point, Gary came out and said, no, next year is going to be even worse. They haven't hit rock bottom yet.
Yeah.
Wait till they hit rock bottom. He's going to be shocked.
All right, so we sort of thought last week that the loss of Ghosn wouldn't necessarily have a big effect on this company. Now I'm not so sure. Okay, let's say you're working at Nissan Motor Corporation in Japan, and you have a fairly high level. Are you going to be aggressively pursuing some new development or suggesting a new platform or a new program, or are you going to keep your head down?
Keep your head down, because look, anybody who was associated with Carlos Ghosn, they're running from the company like a
Right.
sinking
Yeah.
ship.
Well, though this may be just something that's coming to a head, that there's been a lot of problems obviously going on beforehand with
Right.
all these internal struggles that just came to a head recently. So maybe this whole problem's been a long time coming.
But I just look at it from the point of view of the product development. This is a long lead time industry, and if you've got guys now who are not aggressively pursuing new developments while the rest of the industry seemingly is, won't they have a similarly difficult time a few years down the road?
Absolutely. In fact, really, these problems are of Carlos Ghosn's making. To your point, Gary, this is stuff that's been in the pipeline or not in the pipeline for years. Well, guess who was running the company when none of that was happening? How much money did they lose on the Nissan Leaf program, their whole electrification effort? Many, 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 many billions.
Yeah.
They haven't earned a dime on that. Look at how he pushed all his direct reports around the world to go for 10% market share, notably here in the U.S. What did they do? 0% financing, low, all kinds of incentives, flooded the fleet markets. That's all coming home to roost right now.
Well, wasn't that part of the issue with Ghosn, was that he was trying to pursue like personal, he had targets to meet in terms of market share where he would earn extra bonuses, and so he pushed of course, he's not the only one that's done things like that. That certainly happened to a lot of other automakers as well.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, it's...
Yeah.
So in other news, we had Robert Bollinger on the show, I think 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago,
right.
and he's making an electric truck. We've talked a lot about Rivian of late, which will be making the electric truck, which got a $500 million investment by Ford, owns the plant in Normal, Illinois that used to make Mitsubishi, which, oh, by the way, is part of the Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi alliance, just, close circle here.
Yeah.
So Hyundai announced in Hyundai Motor Corp,
In Korea.
in Korea, that they were investing 80 million euro in a company called Rimac. And Rimac was founded by a guy, Mate Rimac, in a garage in Croatia in 2009. So the first car that is coming from Pininfarina, the Battista, has got a powertrain from Rimac. Aston Martin, where Simon Sproul is now, is using technology from Rimac. And here's this company in Croatia that is just, and so I got to ask you guys, does electric vehicles, not electrification, I mean, electric vehicles, is this transforming what we're going to be seeing going forward in terms of small companies becoming important companies, whether it's a Rivian or a Rimac or Bollinger? I mean, who would have thunk, right? I mean, I thought we were supposed to have fewer car companies. Now it seems
Right.
we're having more.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have more because as you get into all this new technology, you have the classic paradigm shift. Everything reverts to zero. Nobody no longer has an advantage in this because even the big, well-established car companies have got to reinvent all this technology, batteries and inverters and chargers and all the other stuff that goes along with it. That opens up the door for the possibility of new entries to come in, like Tesla, which is able to do things differently than others because it doesn't have all these legacy systems that it still has to pay off. It can start with a clean sheet. And
Well-
I'm assuming Rimac's the same in that regard.
And they're able to raise cash, right? It's not like a traditional automaker where nobody wants, you're a part of a dying industry, we want to give you money. But if you're an EV or an autonomous venture or whatever, all sorts of money comes in from venture capitalists.
But I wonder, I mean, part of this isn't it possible that, I mean, okay, if you're an established OEM, you're a giant organization. So if you invest some money in that organization, it's not going to make that big of an effect because it's so big. But if you invest the same amount of money in a startup, you have a greater possibility of getting a return on that money bigger than you would by going with a big organization.
Look at these investments that have been made in the, what is it, Aurora and some of these other, some of these other
Autonomous startups, yeah.
Startups.
Yeah, but look who's at Aurora. I mean, it's only the brain trust, or a good chunk of the brain trust. And Sterling Anderson, and I mean, that's who they're investing in, are these guys with a proven track record. They really know what they're doing. Because remember, Anderson came from Tesla, Urmson came from Google, and prior to that, he was at Carnegie Mellon and the whole DARPA effort. So they know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They're going to deliver.
But I mean, again, they're investing in like these few, game changers. These pivotal people, like we did maybe at the beginning of the auto industry, where there was all these, the Henry Fords and all these, and so you're investing in these small group of brilliant people that are hopefully going to.
Remember, General Motors a long time ago went out and bought this little inky-dinky company in Dayton, Ohio, called the Dayton Electric Company, which became Delco. Mm-hmm. And if I thought about it a minute, I could think up a handful of other examples of where GM went running around the country with a checkbook buying up these companies. No. We're back to that.
That's kind of cool.
Hey,
really cool, actually.
Miro Kafert wrote in to say, hey, and this sort of ties in with what we've been talking about. There's been a lot of press and video PR about Zotier, and I know I'm butchering that name.
Zote, I think it's what it is.
Yeah, that's the American pronunciation. The Chinese one is like Zochang or something like whatever. But all about them coming to the USA, and Autoline hasn't said word one about this. He says, do you have any comment?
I thought you reported on that, I thought.
Oh, well, I'm sure we did report on it.
Well, I mean, I think the whole thing comes down to is the whole issue of tariffs. That and
are we going to see any Chinese car company?
I read that they said they were going to still come.
Well, I think their plans are going to have to be we're going to manufacture in the U.S. or at least do assembly in the U.S. because I believe Trump is going to come out with these tariffs, and that's going to put the kibosh on importing cars from China.
Okay, we did. Dave Zoya met with them and
Dave
did
Zoya's
a story.
the stats guy at Wards.
One of our awards. He's head of research at Wards. He met with them and not that long ago and did a piece. And I wish I remembered more of what he wrote. But I mean, I think they've got like a factory in China with like 1 million capacity. I mean, there's these factories in China that have these enormous, that now have to, a 500,000 capacity in the U.S. is big. 1 million capacity, they got to find markets for these cars. So I think we'll see what happens with tariffs now, but I think you're right. I can't remember if they said they were going to make, I think they probably do have plans eventually.
But I mean, even if they did a CDK plant here, I mean, you're still going to be charged the premium on
components.
the components being shipped in. So.
Correct. Look, I think the tariffs are going to come, and I think it's going to be to absolutely prevent the Chinese from getting into this market. And I think that's the real story behind it.
Well, see, I have a theory, and well, I'm certainly no political genius, but Trump uses tariffs as a negotiating, he's a big negotiator. And I wouldn't be surprised if, these tariffs go back and forth and boom, a month from now they're all gone. Some sort of agreement is reached and everybody's happy and then it's back to square one. But
Could be. I don't think so.
Well, but I mean, in the current case, it seems to me that because we have so few cars that are imported from China into the U.S. market that it's cars are sort of irrelevant to the whole thing.
No, but Drew makes a great point because, we had, for the TV show, we had Michael Dunn in here last week. And he was saying that in China,
And Michael Dunn is an analyst who lives in China.
he is, I think, the foremost expert, or certainly Western expert on the Chinese auto industry. But he said they have something like 20 million units of overcapacity right now. And he says, absolutely, with the Chinese market slowing down dramatically, they are looking all over the world where they can push out the products to absorb this overcapacity. And I just think politically, the U.S. is not going to accept a flood of Chinese cars, especially electric ones.
well, but I'll tell you, the ones they're talking about, they're standard ICE engines.
Mm-hmm.
So they're CUVs or whatever,
Right.
But I just think there's so much. Our economies are so interdependent. I mean, we buy a lot of stuff from China. I mean, and they buy a lot of all of our, reading in Michigan or whatever, we sell a lot of soybeans and all these farm products go out to China and well, so much of the things we get. I mean, it's the Chinese goods help counteract the lack of wage increases among the middle class because we're able to buy a lot of things inexpensively.
All right, shifting from tariffs. So, John, you saw a report coming out of the UK today that I thought was rather.
Oh, yeah, we got to get on this. What it says is Jaguar Land Rover is probably up for sale, and Peugeot, or its parent company PSA, is probably going to buy it from Tata, which is the Indian company that owns it right now. And I was like, whoa, here's something I got to pay attention to.
See, and this is also another little part of the network here that the guy who runs PSA, Carlos Tavares, where did he used to work?
At Renault Nissan.
Yeah, and he always wanted to be the CEO of a company, and that's why he lost his job at Renault Nissan.
He's done a brilliant job with Peugeot.
And he bought Opel.
And turned that around in a year.
From General Motors.
And Peugeot doesn't have a big luxury brand?
Well, they hoped to make Citroën that brand. It hasn't worked out.
But don't they have the DS brand?
It's a sub-brand of Citroën.
Right.
It hasn't worked.
That doesn't have, Jaguar or Land Rover type credibility.
Okay, but here's my question to you guys then, that given the credibility of Jaguar Land Rover, then why would Tata be looking to unload this?
Well, didn't they have just a horrible last quarter?
Not worse than Nissan's.
But here's the thing. I looked at it. If you go back to the 2014, 2015 area, Jaguar Land Rover was doing great. And in fact, from a sales standpoint, from 2014 to now, their sales have gone up over 40%. Their revenue has gone up over 30%. Their profit margin has dropped by more than half. And so they're just spending like crazy. And, they invested heavily in diesels, Gary, as you know so well, and it hasn't worked at all. They've looked at going on this global expansion binge. They spent a lot of money there that hasn't gone anywhere. They've got the Jaguar E-Pace, the electric, but now they're going to have to electrify their whole line. So is Land Rover. They don't have the money for this. Now you got to talk autonomy. Now you got to talk mobility. They don't have the money for it.
That's a good point.
So I think what Tata's looking at is, holy moly, we're going to have to pour billions into this company. And probably Peugeot is, we need to spend money to get into the luxury segment. We got to do it.
Yeah.
Isn't it just cheaper to buy JLR? And sure, we're going to have to invest in them, but guess what? We're going to have to invest anyway.
I don't ask Ford.
Yeah, but Ford did it wrong.
Yeah, I mean it's a fantastic brand. You know, I love British brands, and it's a great brand, but it's expensive either way. But going into the luxury market, who's really done that really successful from scratch?
Only
Lexus.
Tesla. Lexus and Tesla are the only ones.
And
So,
everybody else. Yeah.
I attribute their problems to. This is a shout out to our guest. They make their cars out of aluminum. If they only made them out of steel,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have these problems.
And so the show comes full circle. Well, guess what? We ought to wrap it up now. I apologize to those who wrote in. We didn't get to all the questions. We got to most of them.
What great questions, though.
Yeah,
man. You got a
super
great-
questions, right? Especially the steel related.
Yeah.
Very savvy, right? And we learned, that yes, you can have a manual transmission car and adaptive cruise
Yeah.
control. So, kudos to the audience. Well, let's wrap it up. Thank you all for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv. Ooh, I like the heavy metal.
Or steel still matters. Who knew?
Yes, that's not a bad one. Okay.
Or not heavy metal.